Cool. So I thought I'd give you a run through on how I made this cardboard box bus. And it really is just basically grocery store boxes, like Apple boxes, things like this, or it could just be packaging from your various deliveries. But what I really wanted to get across was two things. One, we can get into a big discussion about sustainability and reusability and recycling, but also I'm someone who works a lot in prototyping professionally, having worked for the likes of Dyson, Lego, Subaru, these sorts of companies, where being able to come up with ideas is one thing, but also putting them into physical form really, really helps communicate the ideas. And I feel that certainly at Dyson, this was something that was stock in trade of coming up with something, mocking it up in cardboard. So even though I appreciate this has a childlike appeal, and maybe there's some designers who, like myself, are just young dads and want to make things like this with their kids. I think actually a lot of the techniques are very transferable. So perhaps forgive the playful theme and take some of the technical skills, or just enjoying the opportunity that you could build this together with your kids. So I hope this is a good guide for you. If you aren't familiar with it already, um, Instructables.com is a great website. And I've put in the links below, and down here we've also got my name, which is Hey Jude on the profile, and also a bunch of other stuff related to my judepullen.com design modeling websites for more tips and detail on this. But essentially what I really love about this process is that a lot of kits you end up in a position where someone uploads a PDF and says download this and follow the instructions. Now, if you like that sort of thing, that's great, go for it. But I would say it's always a little bit gonna limit your creativity and your ability to run with ideas yourself. So I guess without wanting to sort of use the metaphor, give a man a fish versus give a man a net, what I'm trying to do with these tutorials is say there's fundamental techniques that help you work with cardboard. If you understand those, then really the instructions don't matter, because you'll understand how to build and iterate as you go. And so I hope that's the most useful thing about this project. And it's really about getting speed and engagement with whoever you're talking to, in this case, a toddler, but it could be someone working as a design professional. So, preamble done. Let's get into it. So as you can see, it's just really is sort of rough finish. Cardboard is sort of showing all the fluting and things like this, and it's just been kind of painted pretty quickly with my son and actually one of his friends. So really don't need anything particularly complicated, although I would recommend that even though you can sort of get by without a craft knife, for example, you could use a bread knife, but it's just not really an appropriate tool for it, really. So I would say invest in a good craft knife or scalpel, though obviously if your toddler's around, take care with that, as I certainly have to. Good pair of scissors. I've used little axles out of just cotton buds with wooden centers, but you could use centers of biro pens or anything like that. This is basically like a little scoring tool, but to be honest, if you haven't got one of these, you can just use a biro or a ballpoint pen that's run out of ink and just use it to score the cardboard. Obviously pencil's useful, and you can just use any glue gun. I happen to have just particularly liked this cordless battery powered one from Bosch, but this video isn't endorsed or an advert. This is just genuinely, I've really liked using that. And the nice thing is it doesn't actually dispense a ton of glue. So it's really, really good. If my son does accidentally grab hold of it, he's not going to get a really big blob of molten hot glue on his fingers. It'll just be a tiny little dot. Not desirable, but I think you've got to make that call yourself as a parent. So there you go. Anyway, as I was mentioning, not all boxes are equal. I think there's, if you get a box and the bottom of it is really bowed, try to avoid that because it'll only make your end result bowed. And of course, getting ones which have double corrugations are really going to give a bit more strength. So I tend to go hunting for these double corrugated ones, and they're often sort of Apple boxes and things like this. And we have quite a lot of markets where we live, but if not, sort of big supermarket chains also tend to have these if you ask nicely. So, again, I wanted to point out that this was not a sort of cookie cutter, you have to do it this way or it's going to fail. I think, my approach was basically looking at Googling double-decker bus and kind of freestyle sketching it pretty roughly. And as you can see, this is no work of art. And then the key thing is I just decided in this particular patch just to basically, omit that part of the roof, as, my son is obviously going to want to put his toys into it. So I think that's sometimes where you just, go off piste and make something your own. Again, a few little tips and tricks. We could get into the fact that you often do this when you're doing things like laser cutting or CNC machining, but actually it applies even with cardboard, that it's a good idea to cut out the little fiddly bits on the inside of a profile, so like the windows first, and then flip it over, cut through from the back if you need to as well, before you cut all the way around the perimeter. And that's just a good tip. Try it the other way if you feel like it, and it'll make sense why you do it that way. So anyway, again, one of the things which I really love about doing these sorts of tutorials with cardboard is sometimes the obvious stuff in hindsight actually just can really speed up your ability and your confidence to work with cardboard. So again, you'll notice there's not a ruler, there's not a printout plan or PDF. All I've done is freestyled it and then flipped it over, drawn around it on another piece of cardboard box, and then lo and behold, the two are pretty much an identical match. And I think that's a really good system, as opposed to trying to actually cut something out perfectly, where you're always going to make little mistakes, or just it'll take you a long time to get it perfect. So anyway, you end up with the left hand, right hand, and I've kind of just freestyled, if you like, the lower deck by giving a little bit of extra space around where the wheels are, and then put on a roof that I think is approximately going to be the rough shape that'll cover all the way down there. And again, it really doesn't matter that I didn't have a big enough piece left over, and so I've just put two bits together and I'll just stick them together and it's fine. So as you can see, putting the wheel arch in, and then I glued the main sections together. It's reasonable to sort of start in a sequence of putting the main bus side down, then building up. If I was doing something that was very structural, I would try and glue it so that the fluting, the wavy bit of the cardboard, was end on to another flat piece. But honestly, for a kid's bus, you needn't get into that sort of level of detail and accuracy. So it's quite alright, as I've shown here, just to use the whatever comes easiest, and boxes do tend to be in that particular dimension. So as you can see, just looking down it here, that's the general setup. And you can see, if I just click through to it, and this is why I really love the website, is you can skim read it and then go into the detail as you need it if you're getting stuck. And you can see that I've kept the fluting more or less the same, and then put these pieces across and the bottom piece as well. So there we go. And then when it comes to things like the spiral stairs, I just think this is another good example of sort of freestyle modelling, where again, I didn't spend any time measuring something and working out what each step should be. I just kind of eyeballed it and thought, okay, I'll draw approximately whatever it is, 6 segments in a curve, and then I guessed what it would be, and I put a few of them together at a time until it made sense. And to be honest, even if you're looking closely, you'll notice that, for example, the bottom step isn't as deep as the second, third, fourth steps. Is a toddler going to care? Absolutely not. And so I think that's one of those things where having the speed to keep their attention, or indeed if you are in a design situation, working with your client where you're able to sort of crunch through something like this in basically an hour to get a prototype that you can then take home and finesse in CAD, I think is something that's really quite, powerful, especially when people don't always expect you to build something this quickly. So I hope this is really useful. So again, I kind of feel this is a little bit me learning as a new dad, but obviously stairs are kind of very typical for kids to want to go up and down, although I guess I'm speaking a little bit with a Western bias in that maybe other cities, live in more flats. For example, my partner's from Asia, so that's not particularly common, but nonetheless it's one of those things where you can design it about the things that your kid gets excited about. So I put in like a magic slide, as at the minute being in the playground and going down slides is terrific, And so I think it's one of those nice things to sort of not always try and create a faithful double-decker bus if that isn't really what is going to be fun with your kid. And so taking something and making it a bit silly can sometimes make it way more fun, is what I'm trying to say. And I think without trying to split the audience here, I think that goes for professional design as well as designing with your kids. So, making the hinged ramp, there's a nice little trick here that uses the fluting, which is the little hollow bits. And if you stick a cocktail stick or a wooden dowel through it, you can basically pin it into the sides so that it becomes a pivot. It does need a little bit of gluing in place so it doesn't just pop out, but I thought this was a really nice way to have a bit of a surprise opening door, which then allows a slide for things like little minifigs to come down from the top deck of the bus out. And so, as you can see, that's showing it just approximately in place as to what I did. But I thought these sorts of things are really, really simple. And again, something as humble as cardboard can actually have a few little clever tricks if you know how to deploy them. So, creating rounded profiles. I have a whole website, which is judepullen.com/design modeling. Links just down here. And that shows a really nice way how to create these curved profiles, which you see on a lot of, for example, Dyson's prototyping, which they often show off, which is certainly where I learned a lot of tips. And again, all you're really doing is looking at the way, almost like a grain of wood that's fluting in cardboard. And if you score or bend down there, you get a really good curve that looks quite good. And so this is me doing it super fast, not trying to finesse it. But I think it's just one of those things where you can create some unusual and quite structurally strong things as well with this. And so again, you can see I pretty much just slashed it, really haven't gone for anything particularly precise because it folds in on itself and naturally hides all that raggediness. So I think it's knowing when to, should we say, be accurate and when to just not worry about it. So again, I didn't even bother measuring it. I just put a piece long enough to cover it and then sliced off the excess there. And there we have it. So making the wheels, in actual fact, I ended up doing this and trying to put axles in and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if it rolled? But the truth of the matter is, even though I think it's kind of nice, the speed and the force that my son was, enthusiastically pushing this across the floor with his friend, I realized that actually, A, it's better just to glue the wheels permanently in place, and B, it just skids across because it's so lightweight, it really doesn't actually make any difference whether the wheels rotate particularly. So again, there's always learning in this of how you go back and forth between testing it with the end user, in this case, my toddler, or indeed a client. So I think sometimes this is again one of the benefits of cardboard is that it's not a precious material and no one feels like they wasted, thousands of pounds on something. So they have to like it, otherwise it would be awkward. You can just crash through this and get a good result. So similarly, the seating, nothing particularly fancy here. It's just two chunks stuck together and a couple of chunks just to bolster it up. And honestly, I think that's a lot of the key to designing prototypes, that you just need to evoke what roughly a seat is. Because at the end of the day, you can't tell whether he's going to sit a dolly, an action figure, a stuffed toy, a plushie, whatever it is. And so I think the same goes for a lot of things. Just do something that's approximate. And if you hate it or they hate it, you rip it up and start again. So again, little finishing touches and embellishments, just using other things. Turns out you can make some quite nice circles from cardboard, but in some ways it's easier just to use the toilet tube. And there we have just the excess pieces. And I was really just using those. And in some ways, I think this is what's nice about not always pre-planning everything, is that quite often some of the excess shape here, I ended up just using and freestyling, making silly little embellishments on the bus just because the piece was a little bit unusual. And so I'd always try and be a bit open to those sorts of happy accidents. And certainly when I'd ever spoken to any toy inventors when I was working at Lego, the ones who work in a very sort of hands-on way like this, that's most certainly the case. They're not always looking over at a brief and doing a paint-by-numbers approach. That bit comes way further down in the design process when they've really understood all the details and really understand the user experience. So basically blast through it. What's the worst that can happen? It's cardboard. So anyway, that's the final result. And I hope it's useful, and I hope in some ways it inspires you, if you're a designer, to get into the speed prototyping capabilities of cardboard. And if you're a parent, then it's just a nice way to engage your child or children to basically discuss what is possible and figure out together how you could make it into something really fun. So I hope that's useful. Please subscribe either to the YouTube channel and or the Instructables as well, where I try and post these things. So I hope this was a useful scroll through, and hopefully it looks good on a mobile phone when you're on the way home on a Friday night, thinking what to do. So thanks a lot. Bye.